As difficult as reality is to swallow during the season, it can be downright impossible to come by in the off-season. The further we get from the last meaningful game the Washington Redskins played, the more desperate and insane our ideas for their improvement and eventual success become. Less than 5 days into the 2019 NFL league year, it can be very tempting to already proclaim the offseason a success or failure for each franchise. Massive roster turnover, record free agent signings, blockbuster trades, and unexpected cuts leave most fanbases confident they know the direction of their team for the coming season. And while social media makes it easy to find people to validate almost any opinion you hold, the word "fans" is short for the word "fanatics," and rational, measured, and thoughtful are words rarely used to describe the fan base of any NFL team. The reality is, Redskins fans are no different. And while I love interacting with both those that agree with my assessment and those that think I'm an idiot, I do find myself continually running into one fundamental roadblock as I dream and scheme and interact about the future of my beloved Redskins. I can't resist getting caught up in the moment, instead of staying focused on the long term. Let me try to explain. Want your voice heard? Join the Riggo's Rag team. Right for us. As the 2018 season progressed, I knew two things. Deep down, the Redskins had no chance to compete for a Super Bowl, and their current leadership structure was such that no appreciable progression toward that eventual goal was likely without major reconstructive surgery. And yet, in spite of knowing those two facts, I couldn't help but dream of playoff glory when they reached 6-3 with a two-game division lead. I couldn't help but give my Cowboy fan buddies a hard time for how bad they were looking and crow a bit about the downfall of the Giants. And even worse, with Alex Smith injured and Colt McCoy injured and Mark Sanchez benched and Josh Johnson out there running for his life behind a replacement-level offensive line, I couldn't help but celebrate a meaningless win in Jacksonville that all but guaranteed the Redskins would not get a top 10 draft pick. The thing is, I'm a fan, and that's what fans do. We suspend disbelief and set aside our rationality for the sake of the dream of glory. And frankly, with what we pay in merchandise, tickets, parking, cable, packages, and emotional energy, we have every right to do just that. That's the difference between us fans and the owners, front offices, and coaching staffs of our beloved teams. We get to dream, they have to plan. We get to make bold predictions, they have to make tough decisions. Next, roster building versus franchise building. Page 2 LANDOVER, MD, October 18th, Albert Haynesworth. The Chiefs won the game 14-6. Photo by Win McNamee, Getty Images. Just as fans almost always struggle to get out of win now mode during the season, we can't seem to avoid roster building mode in the off-season. We can't get out of our own way, dreaming and scheming for the best possible on-field product this coming season, no matter the cost. We want the team to make all the free agency splashes and trade for all the available stars. But if a team thinks that way, they're in cap purgatory almost immediately and are all but guaranteed to live in a state of constant frustration as their record swings from 4-12 to 9-7 with no real progress ever made. Successful franchises in the modern era find ways to maximize their annual competitiveness, but to do so not at the expense of the 3-year horizon. With the way contracts and the salary cap are structured in the NFL, this balancing act is critical for any chance at sustained success. Teams like the Patriots, Steelers, Seahawks and Ravens have managed this balance much better than most over the last 15 years, while the Redskins have been among the NFL's worst. Roster building looks like massive free agent contracts given to aging stars. Roster building looks like draft picks traded for expensive players at positions of need. Roster building looks like reaching in the draft based on athleticism, name recognition, and upside, rather than listening to your scouts and the needs of your coaches. Roster building looks like a lot of winning off the field, and a lot of mediocre performances on the field. Roster building attempts to avoid being bad, rather than following a plan to achieve greatness. Franchise building looks like careful succession planning, accumulating draft capital, and selling high on high-dollar players past their prime. Franchise building looks like spending on great coaching and training staffs and quality medical facilities and staff. Franchise building looks like hiring smart people that disagree with you and taking their advice. Franchise building looks like being willing to take small steps back in order to be in position for that major leap forward that gets you to the promised land. Next, evaluating the Redskins offseason so far. Page 3. Use your arrows to browse. New Orleans, LA, January 2nd, Landon Collins. Photo by Kevin C. Cox, Getty Images. So with that backdrop, here are some reality checks on the Redskins' moves thus far this offseason. Redskins offseason reality checks. Redskins shouldn't have fired Brian LaFemina and his team. This group understood that a painful truth-telling about the erosion of the fan base followed by an intentional reset of the entire fan experience was the most effective way to move forward as an organization. And they understood the value of the overall fan experience to the health of the organization as a whole. Don't believe any version of that story other than that Bruce Allen and Dan Snyder didn't like being told they'd messed up, and didn't want to have their mistakes in relating to fans to be aired out honestly and humbly by people on their own staff. The Redskins absolutely should have cut DJ Swearinger. Culture matters, and they did the right thing in drawing the line on his constant disrespect of teammates and coaches. Period. Washington should have broken the bank to get Todd Bowles as their defensive coordinator. I don't know, hate the job Manuski has done completely, but he's not flexible enough with his scheme and game plans to maximize the skill sets of his players, and they should have just ripped off the band-aid and made the change. They should have extended Jamison Crowder and Preston Smith before last season, recognizing how much of a discount they could have gotten, rather than letting them hit the open market and get overpaid. Both were coming off down years, statistically, and would have jumped at salaries less than 75% of what they received from the Jets and Packers, respectively. They were right to let Maurice Harris and Rob Kelly go. Those guys were nice stories, but not worth paying for. They absolutely were right to trade for Case Keenum, so as to avoid counting on Cole to make it through the season and to safeguard against the desperation to reach in the first round of the draft. They were absolutely right to sign Landon Collins to a huge long-term deal. He's a young, blue-chip player with upside and a chip on his shoulder. He's a leader, a worker, productive, and will still be in his prime at the end of the contract. He's a short-term boost and a long-term building block. Plus, the contract structure was a thing of beauty. They were right to re-sign Adrian Peterson to provide both production and leadership as Juice works his way back from injury. They should have shopped Zach Brown sooner, but assuming they still wouldn't have gotten anything for him, they were right to cut him and his bloated salary along with Stacey McGee. Next, Redskins checklist for the rest of the offseason. Use your arrows to browse.